The silent marriage. The grand hall of the Zarathian Empire glittered with silver light, filled with nobles from across the stars. Music from crystal instruments echoed through the chamber as the royal guard stood tall, their armor shining like liquid metal. It was a night of celebration, yet the air carried a strange silence beneath the sound of joy. Princess Liara of Zarathia walked slowly down the aisle. Her violet eyes were cold, her face calm but heavy with unspoken thoughts. At the end of the hall stood her new husband, Elias, a human from Earth. He wore a simple black uniform without jewels or royal markings. Among the tall, elegant aliens, he looked plain and out of place. The Emperor announced the union between Earth and the Zarathian Empire, a marriage meant to seal peace between two civilizations after decades of quiet tension. The audience applauded politely, but Liara could feel the whispers behind her. A human? How weak, how small. Why would our princess be tied to a primitive species? Elias heard those whispers too, but his expression never changed. His eyes stayed calm, his movements slow and controlled. When Liara placed her hand on his grip was steady, gentle yet strangely firm like steel under silk. After the ceremony, the two walked together into the palace garden. Silver trees glowed faintly in the night wind. Liara looked at him, trying to understand this human she was forced to marry. "You do not speak much," she said softly. Elias smiled faintly. "Silence keeps peace, princess." His answer was too simple, too quiet. Liara turned away, frustrated. She had met warriors from hundreds of worlds, loud, proud, and powerful. But this man was none of those. He was polite, soft-spoken, and always smiling. To her people, that meant weakness days past. Liara returned to her royal duties. Elias joined her at formal meetings, always sitting quietly, taking notes and asking calm questions. The generals of the Empire laughed at him behind his back. "Earthlings fear conflict," one said. "Their kind hides behind diplomacy because they cannot survive a true war." Liara said nothing, but deep inside she felt a small sting of guilt. Elias never reacted to insults. He listened carefully, spoke gently, and often ended meetings with calm wisdom that even the Emperor found useful. At night, when the palace lights dimmed, Liara sometimes passed by his quarters. She saw him sitting by the window staring into the stars. He always looked thoughtful and sad. One night, curiosity broke her patience. She entered his room without warning. "What are you always thinking about?" she asked. Elias turned to her, surprised. "I'm thinking about home," he said quietly. "Do you miss Earth?" "Every day," he replied, then smiled again. "But I am learning to live under your stars." His words were gentle, but something in his tone made her pause. There was strength beneath that softness, something deep like quiet fire. Liara left the room feeling uneasy. For the first time, she wondered if the whispers were wrong. Weeks passed peacefully, and the Empire began to trust the treaty. Trade routes reopened, human diplomats arrived, and the Emperor grew pleased with his daughter's new calm husband. Everyone began to believe Elias was exactly what he seemed, harmless. But one night, as Liara and Elias attended a royal banquet, a low alarm echoed through the palace walls. The music stopped. The silver lights flickered red. A messenger rushed into the hall, bowing before the Emperor. "Your Majesty," he gasped, "the outer defense grid has been breached. Unknown ships approaching the capital." Panic swept through the hall. Generals shouted orders, nobles screamed, and the Emperor rose in fury. Liara felt her heart pound as she turned to Elias, but he wasn't afraid. He wasn't even surprised. He placed his drink calmly on the table and stood up. "Where are the ships coming from?" he asked the guard. "From the northern rim near the old war zone." Elias nodded slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Then it begins," Liara frowned. "What do you mean, begins?" But he didn't answer. He simply said, "Stay here, princess," and walked out of the hall as calmly as if the alarm were a minor inconvenience. Outside, chaos filled the night sky. The Empire's fleet moved to intercept the attackers, but Liara could already see explosions in orbit. Bright lines of fire cutting through the stars. The city trembled. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the palace grounds. Liara ran to the balcony, her heart racing. Below, she saw Elias moving with purpose, speaking to palace guards, but not in the Zarathian language. It was something else, fast and sharp, filled with coded commands. Then, in the far distance, she noticed the ground splitting open near the old hangar bay, a massive structure hidden beneath the palace. A deep metallic rumble rose from underground. The nobles screamed that the enemy had breached the palace. The emperor shouted for defenses to hold, but Liara's eyes stayed locked on that hangar, on the man who walked into it without fear. And then, for the first time, she felt it. The strange chill of realization. The human she thought was harmless might not be what he seemed. The first strike, the council chamber of the Zarathian Empire, shook as alarms echoed through every corridor. Holograms of burning ships flickered above the round table, and the smell of ozone filled the air. The Emperor slammed his fist down. "Deploy all fleets. No one threatens my empire!" But it was already too late. Reports came faster than anyone could process. The outer rings of the defense network were gone. Entire divisions of cruisers vanished from the scanners. Princess Liara stood frozen beside her father, her mind spinning. Who would dare attack the capital? Before anyone could answer, Elias entered the room, calm, silent, his black uniform unwrinkled, his face unreadable. The generals turned toward him with scorn. "You," one hissed. "This is your doing. The humans have brought spies into our halls," another shouted. "Remove the human before I remove him myself." Elias didn't react. He walked to the tactical display and studied the red dots moving toward the capital. "Those aren't pirates," he said quietly. "That's a coordinated strike. Someone wants your throne." His voice was calm, but there was something cold behind it, something that silenced even the generals. Liara stepped closer. "How do you know this?" He looked at her, his eyes like steel. "Because this tactic was used against Earth a long time ago." Before she could ask more, the chamber lights died. A single red emergency glow filled the room. Outside, the sky turned crimson with burning ships. The ground trembled as enemy plasma bolts struck the outer walls of the palace. Liara's heart pounded. The Zarathian fleet was one of the strongest in the galaxy, yet the enemy was cutting through them like paper. Elias turned toward the Emperor. "Your Majesty, you need to evacuate the upper city. The next barrage will hit the palace directly." The Emperor glared at him. "You dare give me orders, human?" Elias didn't blink. "If you want to live, yes." Gasps filled the chamber. Guards raised their weapons, but Liara stepped between them. "Wait, look at him," she said. "He's not afraid." "He knows something." Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then with a slow nod, he said, "Stay close to the lower levels, and whatever happens, don't follow me." He walked out before anyone could stop him. Liara hesitated only a second before running after him. Outside, smoke and debris filled the air. Drones buzzed overhead like angry insects. Elias moved with purpose, scanning panels on the palace wall, pressing his palm against hidden locks. The metal shimmered and shifted, revealing a sealed elevator shaft she had never seen before. He stepped in. Liara slipped in right behind him. "I told you not to follow," he said, still calm. "I'm the princess," she replied, breathless, "and you are my husband. Whatever you're hiding, I deserve to know." Elias studied her for a moment, then pressed a glowing code onto the panel. The elevator began to descend fast, deeper and deeper, far below the palace foundations. "Long ago," he said quietly, "before this alliance, Earth was studying the ancient ruins beneath your capital. My team found something your ancestors built, something powerful. Your emperor made us promise to keep it buried." Liara stared at him. "What are you talking about?" The elevator stopped with a heavy clang. The doors opened to reveal a vast underground hangar stretching into darkness. Inside it, half buried in metal and dust, rested a gigantic ship, black, sharp, and silent. Symbols she didn't recognize glowed faintly across its hull. But one mark burned bright at the center, a silver Earth insignia. Liara gasped. "A Terran warship." Elias nodded slowly. "Designation Valkyrie. Last of her class." He stepped forward, his calm voice now hard. "She was built to end wars, not start them." He touched a panel on the hull. Lights flared awake one by one. Engines rumbled like sleeping beasts opening their eyes. The hangar trembled. Liara's heart raced. "You hid this here? Beneath my palace?" "Not me," Elias said. "My ancestors. We promised to protect your world if this day ever came." The sound of explosions above grew louder. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the comms, voices screamed about shields collapsing. Elias looked up. "They're breaching the palace. We don't have time." He climbed the ramp into the ship. Liara followed, unable to stop herself. Inside, human crew members were already at their stations, people she thought were servants or diplomats now moving like soldiers. "How many of you are there?" she whispered. "Enough," one replied, strapping into a console. "Commander, weapons online." Liara froze. "Commander." Elias sat in the command chair and fastened his harness. "Power the reactors," he ordered. "Prepare for launch." The ground shook as the warship tore itself free from centuries of rock and dust. Outside, alien citizens looked up in terror and awe as the enormous black ship rose through the palace floor. Breaking into the open sky, the enemy fleet loomed above, firing plasma bolts that scorched the clouds. Inside the cockpit, Liara clutched the back of Elias's chair. "You can't fight them alone," she shouted. Elias's tone stayed even. "I'm not fighting for Earth, I'm fighting for you." The ship locked targets. The red dots on the screen shifted into blue lines of light. "Fire," he said. The first beam erupted from the Valkyrie's hull, pure white energy that cut across the sky like a god's sword. Enemy ships exploded in silence, their flames swallowed by the void. Liara's eyes widened. One shot. Destroyed them all. Elias didn't answer. His expression was calm, almost sorrowful. Outside, the galaxy burned, and the legend of the harmless human began to die. The blade of humanity, the Valkyrie moved through the smoke-filled skies like a shadow from forgotten wars. Its dark hull reflected the fires below as enemy ships filled the void. But for the first time in centuries, Earth's war song echoed once again among the stars. Liara stood behind Elias in silence. Her heart beat wildly as the warship roared to life. Every weapon turret, every engine pulse felt alive, ancient and angry. The quiet man she married now sat like a god of war, his hands steady on glowing controls. "Commander," one of the human officers said, "all enemy cruisers are locking on us. They're forming a sphere around the capital." Elias nodded calmly. "Perfect," he said. "Let them think we're trapped." Liara turned to him, voice trembling. "You can't fight an entire fleet. Not alone." He looked back at her briefly. His eyes no longer held the softness of a diplomat. They burned with something older. "Princess, I was never alone," he said quietly. "Earth always watches its own." Before she could reply, the command deck dimmed. Holograms came alive, showing fleets moving, energy readings pulsing. Then a cold voice spoke through the comms. "Terran signature confirmed. Eliminate immediately." Liara's blood ran cold. "They know you're human." "They always did," Elias replied. "They just forgot what that meant." Outside, plasma fire rained from the enemy formation. The palace shields collapsed completely, and explosions turned the golden towers into molten glass. The Zarathian fleet was broken. Only a few ships remained, powerless and terrified. Elias stood. "Target the lead dreadnought," he ordered. "They're controlling the others through quantum command." Firing solution locked. The crew moved like one mind. The ship's main cannon charged, building power until the entire hangar trembled. Then Elias raised his hand. Fire. A single beam lanced through space, white and blinding. It cut straight through the enemy dreadnought, slicing it apart without sound. A heartbeat later, a shockwave rippled across the void. The entire enemy formation scattered, their communications collapsing instantly. The sky went dark again, only wreckage drifting in silence. Liara watched, speechless. How can one ship do that?" Elias didn't answer. His gaze stayed locked on the burning stars. "Because this ship was built in humanity's darkest hour," he said softly. "When our world burned, we forged weapons not to conquer, but to survive." Liara stepped closer. You knew this attack would come." He nodded slightly. "We intercepted the transmissions weeks ago. The Empire ignored my warnings. So I prepared the Valkyrie. Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice breaking between fear and confusion. "Because," Elias replied, "your council would have ordered me to stand down, and peace built on lies cannot last." The comms crackled again. A terrified Zarathian general appeared on screen. "Commander Elias, our ships are destroyed. We cannot hold orbit. What are your orders?" Elias stared at the alien officer. "Fall back to the surface and protect civilians." "Leave the rest to me," the general hesitated. You are one ship." Elias leaned forward slightly, his tone sharp. "Then watch what one ship can do." The feed cut off. Moments later, hundreds of new red dots appeared on the holographic map. Reinforcements. The enemy was bringing their full armada, thousands of warships. The entire horizon turned red. Liara's voice shook. That's a whole invasion force. Elias adjusted his gloves. Then it's a good day to remind the galaxy why humans don't start wars, they end them. Sir, said his officer, if we push the main cannon again, the core will overload. Then we'll fight the old way, Elias said. The room went quiet. He stood, walked to a sealed chamber beside the bridge and unlocked it. Inside hung an ancient weapon, a blade unlike anything Liara had seen. Black steel, humming faintly with blue light. It looked alive, Liara whispered. What is that? Elias picked it up carefully, and for a moment, the ship's system seemed to react to him. Lights pulsing brighter, engines humming deeper. The blade of humanity, he said. Forged from the remains of our first warship. Every Terran commander carries one. It remembers every battle. He turned toward her, his calm voice now carrying a weight that made her step back. I tried to live in peace, but peace dies when the arrogant mistake silence for weakness. He looked to his crew. Activate the boarding interceptors. We take their flagship by hand. Liara stared at him in disbelief. You're going to board them? That's suicide. Elias smiled faintly. Only if you think we can die. Moments later, the Valkyrie's bays opened, launching drop pods like falling stars. They streaked toward the enemy flagship. Inside one, Elias stood surrounded by armored humans, his secret unit hidden in the palace for years. Their armor gleamed black, their helmets marked with the old Terran insignia. Targets confirmed, one said. Elias nodded. For Earth, for Zarathia. The pods slammed into the enemy hull, metal bending like paper. The doors burst open, and Elias charged forward, his blade glowing with searing light. The aliens inside screamed as the humans cut through their ranks. Plasma bolts bounced off armor that shimmered like starlight. Elias moved faster than any of them could see, his blade singing with each swing. Liara watched from the Valkyrie's screen, trembling as she saw her husband, once quiet, once gentle, now a storm of light and death. The aliens had mocked Earth, but now the galaxy was learning the truth. Humans do not fear war. They become it. The fallen empire. The sky above the Zarathian capital burned crimson. Shattered ships drifted like dying stars. The air was heavy with smoke, and the sound of distant thunder rolled across the horizon. From the palace balcony, Princess Liara watched in disbelief as the Valkyrie hovered over the city, silent, dark, unshaken. Every alien eye that once looked down upon the human now gazed upward in fear and awe. The mighty Zarathian Empire, the oldest and proudest in the galaxy, had fallen to its knees, and it was a human who held the sword. Liara's father, the Emperor, sat slumped upon his throne, his golden robes torn and his crown dim. Around him, the royal court trembled. How could one man do this? He whispered, voice shaking. A single human? The generals said nothing. Their fleets were gone. Their cities were burning. And the people, once arrogant, once unyielding, were calling the name of their new savior. And their greatest fear. Elias, far above, aboard the Valkyrie, Elias stood silently before a large holographic window. His uniform was torn, his blade still faintly glowing. Behind him, his crew patched wounds and reloaded weapons. The war was not yet over, but the battle was won. Commander, said one of his officers softly, enemy signals are fading. The rest are retreating beyond the system. Elias nodded. Good, let them carry the message home. The officer hesitated. And what message is that, sir? Elias turned slowly, his face cold as steel. That humanity remembers. When Elias returned to the palace, the guards stepped aside without a word. Even the proud Zarathian generals lowered their heads. The Emperor rose weakly, fury and fear mixing in his eyes. You deceived us, the Emperor spat. You used our trust to place a weapon beneath my throne. Elias met his gaze without emotion. I protected you, your majesty. You built palaces. We built safeguards. Because humans remember how fast peace dies. You call this protection? The Emperor shouted, pointing toward the burning city. Half my capital lies in ruins. Elias's voice was quiet, but it struck like a blade. Better a broken city than a dead world. The hall fell silent. Even the guards dared not move. Liara stepped forward. Father, stop. Her voice trembled, torn between loyalty and truth. He saved us. If not for him, the enemy would have destroyed everything. The Emperor glared at her. And what is left of our honor, my daughter? Do you wish to kneel to a Terran? Liara looked at Elias, the man she had once called weak, the man who had risked everything for her people. Maybe it's time we learn humility, she whispered. Elias looked away. I don't want your throne. I want peace to mean something again. The Emperor's anger softened for a moment. Then who are you truly? Elias turned to face him fully. My name is Elias Ward, commander of the Terran Vanguard, last survivor of the First Galactic War, the war your ancestors helped start. The Sword and the Promise. The Valkyrie tore through the storm clouds like a wounded beast. Sparks trailed behind her, hull scarred from the last battle. The once proud warship now burned bright against the darkness of space. Inside, the bridge flickered with red light. Systems screamed warnings. But Elias Ward stood firm, his eyes fixed on the massive shadow rising ahead. The enemy flagship, 10 times the size of the Valkyrie, its weapon core glowing like a newborn sun. Commander, said his officer, voice breaking, the reactor's unstable. If they fire that weapon, the planet is gone. Zeruthia will be dust. Elias adjusted his gloves. Then we end this now. Liara's voice suddenly echoed through the comms, desperate and trembling. Elias, don't do this. You can't fight them alone. He smiled faintly at the sound of her voice. I told you, Princess, I was never harmless. The Valkyrie climbed higher, engines roaring like thunder. Enemy ships swarmed around it, hundreds of fighters, firing bright streams of plasma. But the Terran ship danced through the firestorm like it was alive, cutting through enemies one by one. Targeting their core, the weapons officer shouted. Elias's tone stayed calm. No, I'm going inside. The entire crew froze. Sir, that's suicide. He gripped the blade of humanity, its edge glowing faint blue in the chaos. Every Terran commander leaves the bridge only once, when it's time to finish what others fear to start. He turned toward his crew. You all did enough. Take the Valkyrie back into the atmosphere. Protect the capital. That's an order. The crew refused at first, tears in their eyes, but they knew there was no arguing. Elias's will was final. He stepped into the drop bay alone. The doors opened, revealing the void. The flagship's colossal weapon core pulsed ahead like the heart of a god. Computer, Elias said, voice steady. Lock the ship's systems to my command code. If I fail, detonate the Valkyrie's core. The AI's calm voice replied. Acknowledged, Commander Ward. And then, he leapt. The vacuum swallowed him. The stars spun around as his suit thrusters fired, propelling him straight toward the enemy ship. Plasma bolts streaked past. His armor sizzled. Alarm screamed, but his focus never broke. Inside the enemy flagship, panic spread as sensors detected a single life form approaching at impossible speed. It's the human, one of them shouted. He's coming here. Their defenses fired wildly, but Elias was faster, too fast. He slammed through their shields, cutting through the outer hull with his glowing blade. The corridors inside erupted with chaos. Alien soldiers swarmed from every direction. Elias moved like a storm, was silent, efficient, unstoppable. His blade sang with every strike, leaving trails of light in the dark. One by one, their screams faded into silence. He reached the core chamber, a vast sphere of light and energy, swirling with deadly plasma. The core was overloading, seconds from release. Elias pressed his hand on the control console. Override sequence Terra Protocol. The system beeped in confusion, ancient code not seen in millennia. The human encryption took over, locking every system. He could stop the detonation, but there was a cost. To stabilize the core, someone had to stay connected, physically, mentally. Elias took a deep breath. So be it. Down below, Liara stood on the palace balcony, looking at the sky where two lights clashed. One gold, one blue. The Emperor stood behind her, silent. He's not coming back, is he? She whispered. The Emperor closed his eyes. Some men are born to live in peace, my daughter. Others are born to guard it. Suddenly, the entire sky flashed. A column of light erupted from orbit, blinding and pure. For a moment, it was as if the heavens themselves had opened. The enemy flagship vanished, disintegrated by the blast. The Valkyrie's signal flickered once, then was gone. Liara fell to her knees, tears blurring her vision. Elias, she whispered, you promised peace. and in the still air a faint echo reached her through the comms. A recording triggered moments before the explosion. Liara, if you hear this, it means I kept my promise. Humanity doesn't conquer. We endure. Tell your people. We never wanted fear. We wanted respect. And if they ever forget that again. Remember this light, the message ended. Silence followed. Weeks passed. The war ended. The enemy vanished beyond the edges of known space. The Empire rebuilt, slower but wiser. In the Grand Hall, the Emperor signed a new treaty. Not between conquerors and servants, but between equals. At the heart of the palace, under the rebuilt spire, stood a statue, a human man holding a glowing blade pointed toward the stars. Beneath it were carved the words, "He was gentle until the galaxy forced him to remember." Princess Liara often visited the statue at night. She would touch the edge of the stone blade and whisper, "The galaxy remembers Elias," and far beyond the stars, deep in the silence of space, sensors on a distant moon picked up a faint, impossible signal, the heartbeat of an old Terran warship, slowly coming back to life. The Valkyrie was not gone. She was waiting, and somewhere in that endless dark, a voice whispered, quiet but fierce, "Humanity never dies. It only sleeps. Until it's needed again."